Hi, I'm Jonathan Metter, and we're here in PIKO America's service department, and today we're going to show you how easy it is to install fantastic working Soundtrax digital steam sound into a PIKO starter set loco like this Christmas set loco. This will give you great sound on both analog DC as well as digital DC operation. The first step in disassembling any loco, whether you're installing a sound unit or a smoke unit or trying to do some maintenance on the motor, is to test it and make sure you know what you're working with. So we're just going to give it a quick test, make sure it's running okay, and it looks like it is. So everything's good to go and we can tear into the loco. Okay, we'll need a few tools. Your handy dandy PIKO screwdriver set will work for most of the process. Our larger Phillips screwdriver will work on most of the screws on your PIKO loco. And the first step will be a couple of screws underneath the cab, underneath the engineer's step, the ladder there, and one here at the front of the cab. And then a couple of screws that hold the cow catcher on if your loco has a cow catcher, or the pilot beam. And we'll remove those and get underway. And if you're installing a sound unit, one further part to remove would be a little reed switch cover plate with these two screws here under the front of the loco. And there's the last screw. And one good point is we like to work on a loco on a nice soft towel so that we don't scuff up anything on the loco. And we're good to go. And it's a good idea, just so that you don't end up with extra screws when you're putting things back together, to keep your screws and parts nicely arranged, kind of in the order that they were on the loco originally, with the parts that they secured, so that you know what you're working with. And we're coming down to the one screw that everybody tends to overlook, and it's right here between the cylinders, and we'll loosen that screw, and that's going to allow us to remove the whole boiler from the loco. Alright, we removed a bunch of screws from the bottom. Now we're ready to remove the cab. So we lift the back end of the cab up and just kind of get that part up and over the little flag post, pulling backwards gently, and then slide it straight back. Don't go too far. You do have some the figure in there, and you do have some wires to the rear light. So that's removed for now. And now we're going to go to two more screws, which are located right here on the cab floor, that hold the back end of the boiler, the firebox, down to the cab floor, and we'll remove those two screws. And then we're almost ready to remove the boiler. Alright, we're going to pull the boiler front, the smoke box front, off and pull the headlight out there. This is just going to give us a little bit more leverage and a good grip on the boiler. And the little steam pipes kind of snap into the lower part of the boiler front or smoke box, and you'll think you're going to break something, but we're going to lift up on the rear of the boiler and kind of gently jockey it back a little bit and unsnap that little tab there from its place in the chassis, and the boiler will lift off, and pretty clean. And if you'd like to install digital quality sound into your starter set loco, the PIKO 36220 kit offers fantastic quality Soundtrax digital sound with a sound decoder built in. This is a little more sensitive to needing a very well regulated power supply that's going to give you steady voltage and a pure DC voltage if you're operating on DC, or of course it's also ready to operate on digital. So you'll need that kit from your retailer, and you'll also need a smaller speaker that has to come from our parts department. We supply the speaker and the enclosure. The kit is normally made for our bigger locos, like a mogul with a tender, and it's a larger speaker that fits in the tender, so you'll need this smaller speaker to fit in the loco here. But that's again a kit that has most of the pieces that you'll need. You'll need to mount the little volume control and smoke switch just with a piece of double stick tape inside the boiler, and otherwise it's pretty easy to install. The digital sound kit comes with a reed switch holder that's designed to go on the tender truck of a mogul locomotive or any loco with a tender. We actually don't need that part, so we're just going to toss it. With our loco upside down, we're going to remove the reed switch holder that's already on the loco, and this is where our reed switch actually will go on this little saddle tank loco. It fits right there in the front of the loco. As our first step in the actual installation, we'll go ahead and install the reed switch assembly that's going to be used to trigger the bell and whistle with the track magnets when you're running on DC. And we feed the wires through the little opening here in the front of the chassis, just in front of the cylinders, and pull that through a little bit. Here's the holder for the reed switch, and it's got a little pin so you can properly locate the circuit board, and that fits in place. And we pull the wires down a bit so it's neat and tidy, and then we put the cover on. Alright, the installation of the PIKO 36220 digital sound unit into our starter set Loco is a little more advanced installation. It does require a little bit of soldering. Fortunately, the soldering is just to wires, nothing on a circuit board. So it should be, if you got some basic electronic skills, handyman skills, should be something you can handle. Just follow along with the steps, and the wiring diagram shows you all the connections that need to be made. The first thing we're going to do is remove the little tape holding the wiring harness, and in this case we're going to just completely remove all the wires where they're plugged in. You'll notice the headlight wires also are plugged in, and the rear light wires are plugged in. We'll just unplug those completely from the circuit board, or from the wiring harness. And that'll give you a number of these little push-on connector plugs, and those are going to come in handy. We're going to need to solder some of those onto wires to make our connections back to the gearbox and to other things. So save these and clip those wires off and solder them onto some wires for your motor wiring. Alright, we've created some little wiring harnesses using the pins from the wiring harness here. So these have just the little connector pins on them. May not match up exactly to the color code that's in the diagram. It's great if you have wires to make it do that, but as long as you can keep it straight till you get the thing assembled, you're good to go. So we're going to push those into place to connect the power to the track power, the motor power on both terminals. And we'll hook those up to the circuit board. Again, just keeping straight, if we've made changes from the color code, where those wires go, and connect them to the circuit board. Alright, now that we have our two wires bringing power up from the track, that's the outer two connections on the circuit board, and then our two wires sending power back down to the motor from the circuit board. That's the next two terminals inboard from each end. We're going to give this a little test just to make sure that we've connected everything right, and our Loco does run. Okay, we'll need to do a little reading from the diagram here, and this fifth terminal from this end here, we're going to use some of those little wiring terminations with the little connector plugs on them. We're going to clip those off and join those together with one of the leads of our smoke unit. This is the brown wire, and we're going to put all three of those wires into that fifth terminal there. And that's one side of the smoke unit, and also the lights for the wires. Those little terminals will give us an easy place for the LED plugs to just plug right into those terminals, so we can still remove the LEDs. For the rear headlight, we did need to solder on a little bit of extension, just because there's not enough length of wire where the wires have to route through to reach this point on this circuit board. Again, this Loco is really set up for the analog sound unit, which has some wire extensions already on it, and we're putting in the much better digital sound unit, so a little extra work for much better sound. Our smoke unit connects right into this little circuit board here with the switch for the smoke and the volume control for the sound, and the green wire is going into the main circuit board here. It's just a jumper wire, and that's actually in the sound kit. And then our white wire to our smoke unit is going directly to the smoke unit from this circuit board, and the brown wire from the smoke unit is already connected in our little harness that we made of the 3 wires together. A little bit confusing. Just take your time, follow the wiring diagram, make sure everything is hooked up according to the diagram on each terminal, and you'll be good to go. Alright, last step is our speaker, and we did have to do a little bit of soldering, just 2 wire leads onto the speaker because that speaker comes from our parts department without the wire leads. That's going to go in place right here in the back with the speaker enclosure and a couple of the larger screws from our kit, and those 2 wires connect here onto the circuit board, and we'll be good to go. You'll notice we are a little bit close here to the edge of this plastic mounting pad with our wires, so we're going to very carefully bend those wire connections over and to the side so that they don't stick out too far beyond that board, because that's kind of the limit of where we can go. And we will have a lot of wires to fit back inside the shell here. Just be patient with it, take your time, and it does work. Alright, before we put the final screws back in place and reassemble everything, we're just going to give it a little test on the track. We've got the boiler back in place. We've used the little double sticky tape to mount our little circuit board flat inside the boiler there, where we can access the switch and the volume control very easily. We just put the cab kind of in place there, and we're going to put a little PIKO smoke fluid in the smokestack, just a few drops, and we're going to give it a test. Just going to hold the Loco still. It's got great digital sound, great working smoke. And we've got our track magnet here. We're going to pass it over the reed switch. Alright, working great. So we're ready to go ahead and assemble everything and enjoy our new Loco with sound. We tested the locomotive on DC, and it ran great and all the functions worked. And just so you know, it's also equally ready to operate on DCC digital. Nothing to do, no switches to throw, nothing to change. Just put it on the track and run it on your DCC or digital system like the PIKO Digital. And here we go. We can turn on, of course it's a steam locomotive, so we've got to have smoke. We'll turn that on and get our sound going. And of course we should have the headlight on and a bell going to start up and 2 toots and a whistle to go forwards.